Thank you everyone for coming. Welcome to the nuts and bolts of WebdriverIO. You make a good choice. This is our only talk probably in this conference that is not about Selenium. So please stay here. It's still about testing in JavaScript, which can be fun too. We will see. My name is Christian. I'm a software engineer at Sauce Labs working in the newly created open source program office. That means I'm fortunate enough to work on WebdriverIO and things like Webdriver full time now, which is exciting. And I've been working on WebdriverIO for a decade almost. I started it during college and was part of my growth in my career because I was able to learn so many things. And I would recommend everyone who is here and still in the early stages in his career start contributing to Selenium, start contributing to projects like WebdriverIO that can make a huge impact in where you ever go in your career. So before I want to go into WebdriverIO, let's take a step away and let's look at the big picture for now. And let's start talking about WebDriver first, because many people don't really understand how this actually works when the browser does the clicking that you set the test should do, in the test you should do it. So WebDriver essentially is a remote control interface that enables introspection and control of a user agent. So there are a couple of things there. One, it says it's a remote control interface. That means it's a set of rules that enables you to do things. It enables you introspection and control of something, which is a user agent, which at the end can be everything that any device that can be consumed by a user. It can be a mobile device, it can be a browser, it can be a PlayStation, it can be a TV, really anything. And the WebDriver protocol is built to literally can automate all of these things. And if you look into the spec, it's a set of rules that defines what you can do with the user agent that you want to control. The WebDriver specifically, as the name states, it's more focused on the web, so more focused on the browser interaction. There are enhancements to the WebDriver protocol that build on top of it, that, for instance, Appium uses to automate mobile devices. But WebDriver is specific to browsers, and you can see here it's a list of endpoints, and you send an HTTP request to one of these endpoints and it will do the thing in the browser. You don't need to care about how it does it. It will just work. So it's an officially W3C standard. That means that every browser vendor buys into it and will make sure that they provide something that allows the consumer to speak WebDriver with that browser. It's the predecessor of the JSON Wire protocol, which was created by Selenium originally, and Simon Stewart did a fantastic job in moving that protocol to a standard, which will help us to build more reliable tests cross-browser. It's not Selenium. Many people, confuse that. Selenium used to be everything once, like all project that contains everything, the protocol, the browser drivers, the browsers. Now it's Selenium provides you a lot of really good tools that help you to automate the browser, but WebDriver essentially is now living in the W3C and is now implemented by every browser vendor, and Selenium just provides now the tools that allows you to use that protocol. As I mentioned, defines a REST interface, so it can be used by pretty much any language that supports HTTP as an interface. It's a common denominator for cross-browser automation, and these days cross-browser automation is used pretty often, where in reality it's sometimes not really cross-browser. And like I said, it can be used in all languages. And the usual setup is often like this. You have a test script that is written in Selenium, or other tools like WebdriverIO that have their own custom implementation, and then you contact a browser driver using HTTP via Selenium Grid maybe, and that browser driver then does all the magic to do the automation in the browser, and with a really user-focused interface. The same works for mobile. Here we have Appium or things like Selenioid that help you doing that there. which is much more complicated because on mobile, every new operation system sometimes comes with an own automation protocol, and Appium, the Appium community does a really good job in abstracting this away and just give you the Webdriver protocol essentially to automate the phone. And then you have tools like Puppeteer or Cypress that have their own implementation. They use some sort of CDP or have their own way to automate the browsers, which make them really restricted to a single browser, but allow you to do more than just what Webdriver provides you, because Webdriver is really focused on what the user can do. So, as I mentioned, you can automate anything really with Webdriver, and this little demo shows you that I was even able to automate a smart TV back then when I finished my studying, where I was automating a web application that is running on a smart TV, which is called on an HPV TV standard. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that, but it's pretty common in Germany, at least. So the value proposition of Sauce Labs, the company I'm working for, is pretty simple. Instead of setting up all the browser drivers, setting up all the browsers in your data center or in your cloud, we just give you one endpoint and you have the control of everything. The devices, emulators, simulators, and all the browsers, the latest versions. And on top of that, we give you videos, logs, screenshots, and even recently performance reports. And in order to use and automate these browsers, you need tools. You can use Selenium, you can use tools like WebdriverIO, which I've been working on for a while. So what is WebdriverIO? I want to outline some key features. I think what's really awesome about it is that it's really simple to set up. And I'm here staying here and saying that, but I think the Wi-Fi is good enough that I can just show you. Let's count the steps that I need to set up a WebdriverIO framework. I wouldn't call it one step because I just created a directory called demo. I would say that's a half of a step. So then we need to install something that gives you WebdriverIO. These days you have to download the WDO CLI. So this will install a CLI tool that handles WebdriverIO things for me. I hope that goes quick. The CLI tool allows you to run tests. It's a test runner that allows you to run tests, to configure your configuration, to start the REPL, and to install plugins. All right, this is step 1.5. So the next step is to config our framework. So we could go through all these questions as I had here in my nice little GIF, but we just skip that for now, and let's assume that we want to test locally. So this is 2.5. This will install all the dependencies that you need to run Chrome on your local machine using Mocker and having a nice reporter. Next, we need to create our test. So for that, we create a directory. Step 3, then we create the test. Let's say test.js, and let's write a really simple hello world test. So this is using the Mocker BDD syntax. And what I want to do in my test is go to a website and just print the title. Let's say we go to google.com. And we want to print the title. Printing in JavaScript is console log, and then you say browser.getTitle. So we save that. I guess that's step 4. And then we say npx WDO. The command will find the config file and will run a test for you. And there we go. We have Google printed out, and we see the logs, which we can move into a directory and do various sorts of things. But this is what I mentioned with easy test setup. You don't need to put things together by yourself. It comes with an opinionated idea of how things should look like, and how many people already were successful with that setup. It comes with a variety of plugins. This one is, for instance, ApplyTools plugin that allows you to just send your screenshots to ApplyTools and do visual regression testing just out of the box. It comes with integration to things like Source Labs that allows you to update the jobs automatically and add some context to your job details page and give a job a name, things like that. It comes with tons of learning and tutorials and learning content, which is amazing. There's free courses on YouTube and other vendors that allow you to learn WebdriverIO in your free time. And what I really like is the support community. Our things are running on Gitter, and we have, I think, right now 5,400 people that help each other out on a daily basis. So if you have problems and get stuck with things, find bugs, you find the maintainers there. And since 2 years now, we are part of the OpenJS Foundation, similar to Selenium is being part of the Software Conservancy, Software Freedom Conservancy Foundation. The Webdriver is part of the OpenJS Foundation, which is a foundation that maintains and takes care on projects like Node.js, Webpack, Express, AMP, Fastify, Mocker, and they help us to build a sustainable framework and build a sustainable open source project. So whenever people leave the project, they help us find new maintainers and keep the project moving. So let's get a little bit more detail. WebDriver can be used in 3 different modes, and I separate them on the spice level. The really spicy way, and spicy means here that's really difficult and maybe not really nice to use, is the bare metal mode. And that is hidden behind the WebDriver package that you can download from npm, and it really gives you the raw interfaces to the WebDriver protocol. So you have to do a lot by yourself, and it's meant to help you if you want to build your own test framework on top of it. Then a little bit more mild, a little bit more easier to use is the WebdriverIO package if you run it in a script, in a Node.js script. It comes with some abstractions that are really nice and is more easier to use. And then at the end, the really mild version and things that I always would recommend to use is using the WDO test runner that we have just seen a couple of slides before. It comes with an opinionated idea of how you run tests. It comes with plugins and helps you with a lot of things that you usually would do. Here's an example for the WebDriver package. You see it's a lot of code to just open a website and put something in the search input and get the title out of it. You see you have things like you have to know this weird long key that is that is specified in the WebDriver specification to access an element ID. Things like that you usually should not care about if you automate or write a test. A little bit simpler, doing the same thing with WebdriverIO in a Node.js script. You import it, and then you create a session. And you have the abstraction by having an element where you can click on elements, and you have commands that are specified for a browser and commands that are specified for elements. So it's a better abstraction. And at the end of the day, there's this WDO test runner that comes that you run in a testing context. So whenever you want to test your application, you use the test runner because it comes with all these nice things that help you to write sustainable tests at scale. In this example, we open the API page and we iterate over all the commands that we found, and then we click at the end in the first element that we found, which gets us to the get text documentation. And all of this can be handled with the WDO CLI tool. Like I said, it helps you to configure your config. It helps you to start a little REPL that allows you to run WebdriverIO or automate WebdriverIO in your command line. You can run a test, and you can even install plugins with it. So you don't even need to know the npm command. You just use the WDO command to install a reporter, a service, and what you have. Speaking about config file, The config file is the main starting point for every WebdriverIO test run. It contains all the properties that WebdriverIO needs to know about your environment, where your browser drivers are located, and where you want to run your tests. And usually the best practice here is that you create a common WebdriverIO config file that contains all the things that you would never change, like your framework that you would never change, or your timeouts that you want to have fixed in your config. But then, depending on where you run your tests, being in staging or being in development, being locally or in production, if you run post-deploy tests, you want to modify this configuration and adjust it so that it works for that specific environment. So what you do is that you import the common WebDriver config, and then you modify the properties that you want to change for that specific environment. We currently support almost all major test runner in the ecosystem, Mocker, Cucumber, and Jasmine. We kind of support Jest. There's like a star asterisk on it. If you run the WebdriverIO test in Jasmine, it almost feels like Jest test. There's nothing much different in the syntax. But you can also run the WebdriverIO standalone in the Jest framework. We haven't created Jest framework adapter yet, which I don't think we're going to do. But you can technically run WebdriverIO in all these frameworks. And like I said, it comes with a variety of plugins that you can use to customize your setup. You have different reporters like TeamCity, Allure to create an HTML dashboard, Spec Reporter, and it comes with services that help you to integrate into different environments like Sauce. It helps you to, for instance, spin up a server that serves a static website before you start. It comes with services that help you to start the driver before the tests are kicking off, things like that. And what the service essentially is, it hooks into the life cycle of the test. And if you create your own service, you can modify whatever you want that helps your test run in this specific environment. So there are hooks that are, for instance, on prepare and on complete, like before everything starts and before everything ends. Or you want to do something before suits or before a test starts or after a test's finished. Many people use the after test hook to create a screenshot when a test has failed. Those are all, a variety of options that allow kind of the WDAO ecosystem to create more and more services that help you doing various of things. It's like it helps to create a pluggable ecosystem around WebdriverIO. And one of these examples that we have created is a so-called Devtool Service. And the way it works is that when the browser is started, but before your tests start, it connects separately to the browser using this Chrome DevTools protocol. You heard Simon today talking about CDP already. It's the protocol that allows to debug Chrome next to Webdriver, which uses Chrome driver to access the browser to automate it. So I have a little demo here to show you how this can look like. So here I have configured my WDR config, and it has the services Chrome driver and DevTools installed. These is essentially just reference the dependencies that I have for my DevTools service as well as for the Chrome driver service. And with that, I already get access, by having the DevTools service in this list, I already have I get access to additional commands that allow me to interact with the DevTools protocol. And this can essentially look like this. There's a CDP command that allows you to just run commands on CDP. Here I enable the network interface to access the interface of the debug protocol for the network. And then I listen to events like response received. So every time the browser receives a network response, I just print out the URL. And then at the end, there's a method that gives you the page rate. That means how many documents and how many images have been downloaded. These are all described in the docs. So if I now run this command, it spins up Chrome, it opens the Selenium camp website, And you see that it comes with a variety of documents, style sheets, and script, and it shows the size of these files. And then like I said in my test, I printed all the files that the browser has received when I opened the page. And you can do, based on that, you can do various of things like checking if my, HX request was successful or not. It gives you the status code, it gives you headers. This allows you a variety of things to do additional testing beyond what Webdriver provides. Okay. There are more features though. Webdriver provides a different way of fetching elements. There's this magic $ command that just takes whatever you give him and it tries to do the best to find the element. So if you just provide a CSS selector, it figures out that this is a CSS selector and queries an element based on the CSS selector strategy. You can use XPath, link text. You can find elements based on and tag plus a text behind, which is sometimes really useful. What WebdriverIO does here in the background is it creates an XPath and runs it. There's even support for React applications. So when you have React applications, the React DOM tree is different than the HTML DOM tree that is at the end rendered by the framework. And sometimes it's really difficult to connect the React application to the HTML tags that are in the browser. And so with the React $ command, you can actually fetch a React component that is, was defined in your React framework and filter it by state or property, which can be really useful if you run a React application. We also have the same for shadow commands. So there's a shadow $ that allows you to run a shadow command that allows you to fetch shadow elements. There's the same for Appium. If you run a mobile app, there are commands that are specific for iOS, but they're general selector strategies like the accessibility ID that allow you to fetch elements in both worlds, iOS and Android at the same time. There is a thing called custom commands. So you can always extend the interface of the WebdriverIO browser by providing your own command. I usually do that a lot when I want to access my API to, for instance, create a user or to create a user for my test. In this custom command, you can do whatever you want, and if you return a promise, then it waits until that promise is resolved to continue with the test. So everything is still synchronous, and you don't have to worry that much about async await. That is usually a common problem in JavaScript. When there's the concept of multi-remote, where you usually run always one browser for one test, which is, if you want to test what the user is experiencing, then this is what you do. But sometimes there are different use cases. For example, if you want to test a chat application, or if you want to test a game, where you have multiple actors, and you want to make sure that these actors can work with each other. So in multi-remote, you get multiple browsers that you can control at the same time in one test. And that allows you to, check if a chat works, or it allows you to, automate a game between two or multiple players. Webdriver supports the concept of the page object model. You probably are all familiar what a page object model is. It literally is a design pattern that became really popular in the test automation space because it keeps your code and your test code really clean by abstracting away the page that you want to test, so that your test itself stays clean and maintainable. The idea here is that you keep all these selectors and all these custom functionalities of your page in this page object. So if something changes, you only have to modify that specific page object. So if you, let's say, redesign your complete page, essentially you only need to change the page object to make your test work again. And the page object in WebdriverIO can look like this, where you define selectors as a getter function, and then you have custom commands to interact with the page, which makes your test code at the end look like this, where you almost have no interaction with the browser object anymore or with elements because it's all hidden behind the page object. And it looks quite nice and understandable. But yeah, a demo is worth 1,000 words. Let's start with a couple of demos that I've prepared. First off with the multi-remote. As I mentioned before, it helps you to run multi-browser at the same time. Do I have this open? I can just open it. So I have two examples here for multi-remote. One is testing a WebRTC application. The other one is testing a chat application. In the chat application, I initiate a WebdriverIO instance calling the multi-remote function, and I define multiple browsers that I call browser A and browser B. And then if I call a command on the matrix object, both browsers do the same thing at the same time, but I can then always do a single thing with run browser. So for instance, if I want to log in with browser A, I call the browser A method, and if I want to log in with browser B, I call the browser B method. And at the end, this can look like this. So npm run test thing chat. So there are two browser sessions, then browser A and B log in. Browser A says, my name is Edgar, and the other one reads the message and says, hey, Edgar, what's up? So it's an interactive way to find out if the chat actually works. The other one is a little bit more simpler because it just opens a WebRTC application, and it doesn't really test anything, but it's just a showcase of, hey, I could literally test whether or not the WebRTC connection was successful. So let's run WebRTC. Again, two browsers spinning up, and they join this channel, and they can now see each other, and I could run tests on that. The next thing is performance testing. I was about to do this demo, but I have another talk in the afternoon about performance with WebDriver. So if you're interested in how you can do front-end performance testing with WebDriver, you should come to my talk at, I think, 5 or so. So I'm going to skip that because I'm going to do this demo at this talk. Next one is visual regression. As I mentioned, there's an Applitools integration, and if you use the service, where is it? So there's the Applitools service and a Chrome driver service. So I run locally using Chrome driver, but use Applitools to push up my screenshots. And this can literally just look like that, where you open URL, and then there's a take snapshot method that you can use to upload the screenshot to Applitools, which then takes care of asserting the screenshot and making sure everything is visually perfect. So let's run this test. So since Applitools is hooked into the lifecycle of the test, it does a lot of things when you open a URL that you don't have in your test, but it's all behind the service. So here, it creates the right window resolution, and then once the image is uploaded to Applitools, it will finish the test. I can try to go to Applitools to see that this worked. Sign in. And so my test passed, and so it should be visible here. Both of the screenshot are here. So this all happened automatically in the background without you having taken care of it. And the next one is watch mode, which is the ability to watch certain files while you're developing your application, and WebDriver would just rerun the tests on that specific files. So let's say, you come to the office in the morning and you want to work on your application. So what you do is you say npm run watch, which starts WebdriverIO in the watch mode. And what you see here is that I'm spinning up, I think, roughly 50 sessions in our headless data center. So all these browsers are running headless, like a headless Chrome or Firefox. Let's see, there it is. So it takes roughly 20 seconds until everything is done. So now I'm working on this specific test that I have, which goes to the internet example page, and it just tries to test if I can log in with basic authentication. And then I check the headline if I'm actually logged in. So if I do something here, and I say console log hello world, it will just rerun this specific test. So press save, and all these tests run almost at the speed of a unit test, which is pretty cool. So you can develop your application or develop your test cases while everything is running in the background, and you save a lot of time because WebdriverIO doesn't spin up or tear down the browser session anymore. It just reloads the page. So if I then, for instance, change something in my application, it would rerun all the test cases. So I have just a demo app here because I haven't hooked up an actual real application. But for the sake of the demo, I was able to rerun all the tests within 10 seconds. And if you keep your tests really short and independent from each other, this kind of concept works really well. So we've been continuously working on WebdriverIO for the last year after we released version 5. And almost, I think, in 2 weeks or maybe in 3 weeks, we have also a major release up front of us, which is the version 6. And it comes with some really interesting features. One is that we will fall back to the Chrome DevTools protocol if you run locally and use Chrome, Firefox, or Edge using Chromium. So that means that you don't need to download the browser driver anymore. If you just download WebdriverIO, it tries to find your browser and it tries to connect to the CDP and would just run the same commands but using the CDP instead of WebDriver. So that makes setting up your WebdriverIO test in your CI/CD where you just have some local tests on Firefox and Chrome makes it a little bit more easier. We will provide you with an embedded assertion library, so you don't need to set up Chai or any random JavaScript assertion library anymore. We provide you with one that is pretty close to what Jest is currently doing, this expect model, and it comes with a variety of really great things where it shows you exactly when you say when you expect a certain element to have its text and the text is different, then it shows you in which cases it is different. You can use the snapshot capability of the framework and all these things. And this framework is built in, so there's one step less that you need to do to set up the framework with WebdriverIO. There are going to be a lot of performance improvements. Majorly, like when you fetch elements, we looked into how WebDriver is doing it, and we tried to improve that. And one of the things as well is like we lower the bundle size, and we are now able to run WebDriver in the browser technically when you would use a service like Sauce Labs. So this will allow us to build a fiddle application using WebDriver, so you can write your WebDriver test in the browser and share your test code with your colleagues, which is the thing that we want to build but isn't been done yet. We will drop support for version 8, for Node version 8, because that is legacy and you should not use it anymore. And we will make sure that if you're still on version 5, you can still continue doing so. We will backport all bug fixes until we are releasing version 7 at some point when we're going to make version 5 a legacy then. So you have a lot of time to upgrade. And this time, upgrading from version 5 to version 6 will be not as difficult as it was for version 4 to version 5. That being said, there's a lot of things that you can get involved in. You don't need to know about test automation a lot to help support WebdriverIO. You don't need to know about coding a lot to help and support WebdriverIO. There's just a ton of things that you can do help us. If you like to work on a fiddle application and you're a front-end engineer, come to the project and do that. We have tons of things that we want to improve, and we could need any help for that. And like I said in the beginning, other things that I got into my career was pretty much based on this framework, by working on it and by learning and being part of the community. So this is really what I would recommend everyone to do. That being said, thank you so much for attending the talk, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Hello, I have one question. In your code example, you're not waiting for any elements on web page. So you type browser URL and then click. Should we wait any elements?
So here's a trick. Since we have time, I can just do that. Let me spin up a REPL. Like I said, you can, npx. So you can spin up a Chrome session by saying REPL Chrome. Or not, -p. Well, I would have to hand wave here. So what Webdriver is doing in the background as like a nice thing, and that helps you to run tests easier, is that it has a middleware that waits on certain elements. So if you fetch an element and it's not there, then it's fine. You can continue the test, but once you interact with the element by asking what's the text of the element or what's the color of the element, then it will wait for, I think, a couple of minutes, but this is configurable, until it actually says, oh, even after 5 seconds I haven't found the element, and you should try something else. There's also commands like wait for exist or wait for displayed or wait for clickable that allows you to explicitly wait on in other ways. But as a standard default functionality, we wait for a couple of seconds until the element is there.
Okay, cool. So another question, I'm working with Puppeteer, and Puppeteer have a function like page go to, you paste your URL, and then you pass a parameter like wait for network or wait until page load. Is it in WebdriverIO, is it coming under hood or? So,
there's no concept of, or it's difficult to describe when the page has been loaded. There are tons of ways how you can say, okay, page is loaded, but actually no, it's loaded when the last image has been loaded, right? So that's why WebDriver has no real concept of loading, but you can be always ensured that when you open URL, the page is somewhat loaded. So you don't need to wait on the page load. What you would technically need to do is, if you interact with an element and this element is being rendered by React or Angular and comes a little bit later because it has to fetch some information before. But like I said, under the hood, we always wait like a couple of seconds, so you don't even would need to do that. So it's all happening in the background, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Christian, in few words, could you please describe the debugging process?
The debugging process. So there's one option you can do that I always recommend is, let me find the right demonstration. Okay. WebdriverIO. So like I said, let's say one of the common things that I always recommend is the debug command that we have. So you call browser.debug, and if I call, no, when I call my thing again, I think it was just XP. So if I call my test case, and I have this situation where I cannot continue because something fails. So you see the browser execution has stopped, so I can enter something here. So I can say browser.getURL, and it's undefined. Well, this command is used to work. So the debug command used to allow you to interact with the browser in the command line interface. And You can run all the commands, and you can rerun your test script in that REPL to check what's going on. When you use VS Code, you can also set breakpoints. I don't have an example for that because I don't use VS Code, but there's a YouTube video for that can help you.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have a question?
I can without the mic.
Wait.
Ja, okay. Ja, Christian, danke für die wunderschöne Rede.
Danke.
Yeah, thanks for the speech. Small question, I didn't see where you can start, like I'm not familiar with that, and what's the best way to start with it? Is it, you said that there is documentation, but what's the best way to explore it? Yeah.
So I would recommend the first thing, if you want to start using WebdriverIO, is going to the website, and there's a guide that gets you started with the test runner, and there's a step-by-step description about how you get your first test running. And then, you can read through the other documentation about if you want to add like a certain service. Every service or every reporter has a description how you can set it up. And everything is there. If you have like, problems or questions, you come to the Gitter channel in the support chat, and you can always reach out people that are there and they help you out. But the first good thing is go to the guide that helps you to get up and running quickly.
Okay. Danke sehr.
Bitte.
Thanks for your talk. Could you please answer, does WebdriverIO support lazy elements on the new version of WebdriverIO or not?
Lazy elements in terms of?
In terms of page object model. So I see that you present some page object model, and you set page element inside getter function.
Yes.
So can I use can I create element without getter function or not?
Yes. So if you use a page object, you should use the getter to define an element, because this will only fetch an element once you access the property of this page object. So you should never open a page and fetch all the elements that you want to interact with right in the beginning, only when you really access the element and want to do something with it. And if you use getters in this way, it will exactly do that.
Okay, got it. And the second one, does WebdriverIO support React Native application? If yes, is it any restriction to work with React Native mobile application?
You can automate everything with WebdriverIO, even smart TVs. And yes, React Native applications are also supported, but I don't know if we have anything special around React Native, but it is like a normal native application that you can automate. And there's everything selector-wise that you can use to fetch elements and to interact with these elements.
Got it, thanks.
Thanks for the speech. I'm really interested. So the recently released tool from Microsoft, which is the Playwright, and it's like Puppeteer, but for cross-browser, will it's going to be the direct competitor of the WebdriverIO, and what's going to be the breaking reason to use the WebdriverIO over the Playwright?
So there are a lot of opinions about that. Playwright, you said is cross-browser. I would say it's not, because what Playwright provides you is not what the user is at the end using. It's a modified browser that you have to download when you use Playwright. It is also not. It helps you to debug and automate the browser, but it's not essentially focused on the testing concept. So with Playwright, you need to set up your test framework and all the things by yourself, and it will only be that. It will only give you a little bit more access to things, but it will be restricted to the part of you can automate the browser, but you have to figure out how to do it. So WebdriverIO will be always a test runner that will help you to test applications, and it will, moving forward, like more leverage the CDP and the DevTools protocol to help you doing things that a developer would do, like mocking and stopping API requests and doing all these interesting things like accessibility testing, performance testing, all that. We are going to move in there, but we have to see, because CDP and currently Playwright, they only support a certain set of browsers, and I'm more interested in getting the browser vendors together and provide a protocol that works across browser and where we all commonly agree on an interface that we can all use, instead of providing something that just works for them but not for the rest of the world.
Thanks.
Hi, thank you for the speech. I have a question about the logging. Do you have any capabilities to log the actions that done with elements, for example, click, get text, or something like this?
Yes, so you have this WebdriverIO logs, like these ones here on the left, that give you the command and the element that has been clicked on, and you can either put these logs into standard out, like in your terminal, or you can put them into a file. I think I have it here. You see there, you can't see it on the left side, but there's on the left side, you see logs that are automatically created by WebdriverIO that give you the same thing and give you what happened in the page when you run it. So there, WebDriver automatically creates multiple log files for you that you can inspect after your test has been finished.
Thanks.
Last question.
Thank you for the speech once again. So I just want to ask a question regarding, will I face with some issues or problems if I decide to use WebdriverIO in async mode?
If there are any problems with that?
Yep.
No, the sync mode is commonly supported if you use I'm not sure if there are Linux variations that wouldn't support it, because you have to install a plugin for Node, which has to be compatible with your system. But I haven't seen any people that have a lot of problems. The majority of people that use WebdriverIO use it with the test runner in sync mode, because it makes it a lot of easier to just run commands synchronously instead of using async await.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.